Something about this whole thing is not adding up, and I need you to sit with me for a second before we even try to unpack it. Because what Claressa Shields just walked into on her own live stream is not a mistake. It is not a bad day. It is not a rookie moment. It is the exact instant the entire GWOAT brand collided headfirst with the reality that no belt in the world can protect you from a bad business plan running in real time. And I know, some of you already saw the clips. Some of you already saw Big Keys carve her up like a Thanksgiving turkey. Some of you already saw Papoose sitting in an airport typing the word, work, while his woman was downstairs modeling brown polyester sauna suits in the middle of a July heat wave. But I promise you, what you saw on the surface is not the story. The story is what is sitting underneath it. Because the woman calling herself the greatest woman of all time just asked strangers on the internet to cash app her $120 and drop their real home address in the memo line. And then, the very same week, quietly confirmed something about her team, her partner, and her entire business infrastructure that changes how you have to read every single move she has made this year. Two things happened at the same time. One of them is loud, viral, and funny. The other one is quiet, buried, and career-defining. And nobody in the reaction space is drawing a line between them yet. That is what we're drawing tonight. So when we get to the part about who has actually been running the champ's business decisions this year, and I promise you we are getting there, we are going deep into it, I need you to remember the sweatsuit, because the sweatsuit is not the punchline. The sweatsuit is the evidence. And Papoose being in that airport is not a coincidence. Papoose being in that airport is the confession. Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit like, and subscribe. Let's get into it. Now let me pull you all the way back and set the table properly, because I do not want anybody clicking off this video without understanding exactly who we are talking about, exactly what happened, and exactly why this one specific weekend of chaos is being treated by boxing insiders, hip-hop commentators, and business people as a genuine turning point in the Claressa Shields story. Claressa Shields, for the newer viewers in the room, is not some content creator with a ring light and a dream. Claressa Shields is a two-time Olympic gold medalist out of Flint, Michigan. She is a two-time undisputed world champion across multiple weight divisions. She has more belts than most fighters have professional wins. She has been on the cover of magazines, walked red carpets, headlined pay-per-view cards on DAZN, and even had a full biopic made about her life. She has been telling anybody with a microphone for the better part of a decade that she is the greatest woman of all time in the sport of boxing. And honestly, on the resume alone, she has a real argument. That is the piece I do not want anybody to lose sight of in this conversation. The talent is real. The medals are real. The belts are real. The resume is genuinely stacked. This is not a story about somebody who does not deserve to be in the room. This is a story about somebody who is in the room, at the top of the room, and keeps deciding to burn the room down with her own two hands. And that brings us to the second half of the cast, because you cannot understand this weekend without understanding Papoose. Papoose, real name Shamil Mackey, is a New York rapper who has been in the game for over 2 decades. He came up battling. He came up freestyling. He came up on mixtapes. He came up as a genuine student of the craft. He was married to Remy Ma for years, and their relationship became one of the most public marriages in modern hip-hop. That marriage ended, and shortly after, Papoose and Claressa Shields turned into a whole media cycle of their own. She has publicly said she wants to have a baby with him in 2026. Reportedly telling Angela Yee on Way Up that the timeline is locked in. She has said she wishes she could give him a baby for his birthday. She has posted about him, defended him, and gone to war for him on the timeline every time somebody has raised a question about the relationship. And now, according to what the champ has confirmed herself, Papoose has been given an even bigger role in her business, because Claressa Shields has publicly announced that Papoose is now part of her management team going forward. So stack all of that up together. World champion. Two-time Olympic gold medalist, undisputed, GWOAT brand, boyfriend who is a 20-year hip-hop veteran and now officially part of her management structure, announced baby plans on the horizon, announced pivot from MMA back to full-time boxing, announced merch line drop, a whole ecosystem being built in public. And then, in the middle of one of the hottest summers on record in the United States, with Chicago hitting the high 90s and the East Coast buckling, the champ decides to hop on a live stream, sitting in what looks like a living room, and personally sell polyester sweatsuits and jumpsuits to her fan base with a Cash App handle and a request to please just drop your real address in the memo so she can personally get it shipped. That is where the story starts. That is where the timeline collectively lost its mind. And that is the moment we need to break down piece by piece, because what people are missing about that live is not what she was selling. What people are missing is what she was accidentally revealing. And the question sitting under all of it, the one I'm going to answer before this video is over, is very simple. Who is actually running the business of Claressa Shields right now? And why do all the receipts keep pointing back to a name nobody in her camp wants to say out loud? Let us start with what is visible, because there is a mountain of it. The first piece of evidence is the live stream itself, which is now clipped, ripped, screenshotted, and re-uploaded across every hip-hop and boxing page on the internet. The GWOAT is sitting on her phone on a shaky vertical stream, holding up a full rack of polyester sweatsuits and jumpsuits in what looks like a mid-July garage sale setup. She is modeling the brown one. She is modeling the blue one. She has a friend leaning into the frame, touching the fabric with hands that look like they just came off a gym floor. She is talking directly over the merch. She is blocking the branded cups she is trying to sell with her own hands. She is telling people on camera not to buy the brown one because she had literally just been sweating in the brown one at the gym. This is not a rumor. This is not a clip out of context. This is documented, it is on video, it is on the champ's own account, and every commentator in the space has clipped some version of it. Piece of evidence number 1. The product presentation is a heat crime. In July, during a nationwide heat wave, from a fighter whose brand is discipline. Piece of evidence number 2 is the payment structure. And this is where every business coach in the country genuinely started sweating on her behalf. The champ was, in real time, telling viewers to cash app her the money at a specific handle, and then type their physical home address into the memo line of the transaction. No Shopify, no storefront, no shipping platform, no branded checkout, no size chart, no return policy, no tracking. Just send me the money and put your address where the note goes. This is a 2-time Olympic gold medalist on the internet, in the year we are in right now, running an 8-figure name through a payment method that any e-commerce person would tell you is unsafe on both ends. Unsafe for the customer, because your home address is now floating in a cash app transaction. Unsafe for the champ, because there is no legal paper trail, no return protection, no chargeback structure, no fraud protection. It is the most exposed a champion of her stature has ever been in a business moment on camera. And the internet clocked it instantly. Piece of evidence number 3 is the auction segment. Because it was not just sweatsuits. There were bobbleheads. There were cups. There were hats. And the champ on her own live was running what was supposed to be an auction. And the auction was dead. Multiple viewers noted, and Big Keys later hammered on this, that items were going once, going twice, and getting sold to nobody. The Dow Jones would have crashed if this merch line was a publicly traded stock. It is the kind of quiet that no live seller ever wants to feel, and it is the kind of quiet that no amount of I am the GWOAT energy can talk you out of. Piece of evidence number 4, and this is the one that turned the whole thing nuclear, is Big Keys. Big Keys, if you do not know him, is one of the loudest voices in the current commentary space, a streamer who has built his platform on being the guy who says the thing everybody else is too polite to say. He pulled up his camera the second he saw the clips, and what he did on that reaction stream was not a reaction. It was a full autopsy. He opened with a line that has already become a meme. He said, "Imagine yourself walking in the gym in this." He called the whole live a heat crime. He called it a Missy Elliott starter pack. He said the polyester was so thick it looked like stage wardrobe from a music video from the early 2000s. He said if you actually put on that jogging suit and that hoodie in July, you were basically walking into 1,000 punches to the back of the head, and you would feel like you just went 12 rounds with the GWOAT herself. Every one of those lines got clipped. Every one of those lines got re-uploaded. And within about 24 hours of Big Keys posting his reaction, the champ was the main character of the entire internet, for all the wrong reasons. And this is the piece I need you to hold in your head as we go deeper, because Big Keys did not just crack jokes. He kept escalating. He kept layering. He kept dropping punchlines. And by the end of his stream, he had turned the champ from a boxing icon into a walking meme. And he did it using only the footage the champ had voluntarily posted herself. That is the part that stings. Nobody hacked anything. Nobody dug up anything private. The champ handed over the material. Big Keys just narrated it. And that is where we have to shift, because I told you the sweatsuit is not the story. So let me show you where the real story starts. Because the moment Big Keys pivoted from the merch to the second question, the whole live turned into something completely different. And oh, do I have more? Because now we have to talk about the ghost of the entire situation. And I know some of Papoose's Day One fans are not going to want to hear this next section, but you cannot tell this story honestly without walking through it slowly. Big Keys, mid-live, in front of tens of thousands of people, asked the question that had been sitting on the entire internet's tongue for months. Where is the boyfriend? Where is the man of the house? Where is Papoose? And when the timeline started pulling receipts, what they found was not just embarrassing, it was structurally revealing. Because Papoose, on the very same weekend, was not at home helping his woman move product. Papoose was, according to his own Instagram story, sitting in an airport, telling his followers that his flight had been delayed 4 hours, and that he had nothing but time. Nothing but time. While the woman he has publicly said he is building a life with was downstairs, in the same jogging suit she was trying to sell, running a dead auction, begging her audience to please just buy one of the cups. The first piece of cultural evidence layered right on top of that is the airport story itself. Because it is not just that he was traveling. It is where he was traveling to. According to what Papoose posted publicly, and what the Shade Room and other outlets ran with, the man was headed to West Africa. He was headed to the motherland. He was calling it work. And when the champ later spoke about it, she opened up publicly about missing him during that Africa trip, which is a beautiful sentiment on its own, but the timing of that trip, aligned to the day of her merch launch, was the thing the timeline could not stop chewing on. Because the internet is not stupid. The internet lines things up, and the internet lined up his boarding pass with her live stream and asked one simple question. How is the man now officially on her management team not in the room for her biggest business moment of the summer? The second piece of cultural evidence is the reaction from other hip-hop figures, and this one is a whole subplot on its own. Because if you've been following this year on the timeline, you already know that Remy Ma, Papoose's ex-wife, one of the most respected female rappers in the game, has publicly told Claressa Shields to refrain from speaking after Claressa jumped in to defend Papoose during a spat earlier this year. That is not gossip, that is documented, that is on the record, and Claressa clapped back. Now put that clip next to the garage sale clip. Put the woman telling Claressa to sit down next to the live stream where Claressa is trying to sell polyester in the middle of a heat wave without her partner in the room. You are watching two timelines of one relationship. And neither one of them looks good for the branding operation Papoose is now officially part of. That is not me talking. That is the receipts talking. The third piece of cultural evidence is what happened after the live. Because Claressa Shields did something that even her most loyal fans could not defend. She reportedly called into a YouTube live under a fake persona to defend herself against the criticism. And according to what has been reported and reacted to across the space, she ended up blowing her own cover mid-argument. Think about the layers on that. The undisputed champion of the world, allegedly logging into somebody else's stream under a fake identity to argue with commentators, and then getting caught by her own voice, her own phrasing, her own energy. That is not a woman who has a media team. That is not a woman who has a crisis manager. That is not a woman whose new management structure, which, remember, publicly includes Papoose, is running interference for her the way any professional operation should be. That is a woman running her own damage control at 3 in the morning on somebody else's channel. And it is the kind of behavior that tells you exactly how thin her actual support system is once you strip away the belts and the resume. The fourth piece of cultural evidence is what other fighters, other celebrities, and other athletes did not do. They did not co-sign. They did not repost. They did not amplify. When a real champion drops merch, the culture rallies. Other athletes buy publicly. Other artists post a link. Other celebrities are tagged. And what you saw during the Claressa Shields garage sale was silence from the peer group. No major boxer publicly bought a sweatsuit. No major hip-hop artist reposted the drop. No major athlete tagged her back into a positive momentum cycle. The industry, quietly, let the champ eat that live stream by herself. And in a business where visible peer support is a signal of health, the silence is louder than any punchline Big Keys threw. Now I want to be fair here, because I am not one of these commentators who will only stack the receipts one way. Some of the champ's defenders have raised a real counterpoint, and I want to give it real oxygen before I dismantle it. The counterpoint goes like this. Claressa Shields is trying. She is taking her destiny into her own hands. She is not signing away her merch rights to some corporate apparel brand that will take 70% of the margin. She is going direct to her fans. She is doing what smart modern athletes are supposed to be doing in the creator economy. And that argument, on paper, has real weight. That argument is why athletes like LeBron James, why fighters like Jake Paul, why entire creator brands are being built off the back of exactly that thesis. So credit where credit is due. The strategy is not wrong. The strategy is right. The problem is not the strategy. The problem is the execution. Because going direct to consumer without a team, without a platform, without a size chart, without a return policy, without a warehouse, without a manager who is actually in the room, is not entrepreneurship. It is improvisation dressed up as entrepreneurship. And you can hear the difference the second the camera turns on. That is why the counterpoint collapses. The champ is not being punished for trying. The champ is being punished for trying without the infrastructure a two-time Olympic gold medalist should have on retainer by now. And that is the moment we have to shift gears, because everything up to this point has been about the surface and the culture. Now we have to go one level deeper, because the real story of Claressa Shields in the year we are in is not a story about a bad live stream. It is a story about a business structure. And the business structure is where every question about this weekend actually gets answered. So let me switch the lens on you completely, because we are done talking about sweatsuits. Let me walk you through what actually happened to Claressa Shields' management this year. Because if you missed it, you missed the entire foundation of what we are watching unfold in real time. Claressa Shields confirmed publicly earlier this year that she had parted ways with her longtime manager Mark Taffet after roughly a decade together. 10 years. That is not a small break. That is not a routine roster move. That is the equivalent of a superstar rapper firing the manager who was there from the mixtape days. Mark Taffet was the guy who helped position her from Olympic phenom into pay-per-view headliner. Mark Taffet was the guy publicly defending her when the Michigan Commission dropped what he called a salacious statement during her marijuana suspension controversy. You can pull his quote from the Ring's coverage. It is on the record. That is the relationship she walked away from. And when she walked away from it, the natural question in the industry was, who steps into that seat? Who runs the business of the GWOAT going forward? Who negotiates the deals? Who structures the merch? Who protects the brand? Who calls the shots when the camera turns on? The answer, which the champ herself confirmed publicly on Instagram in a joint announcement with Papoose and her management team, is that Papoose is now part of that structure. Papoose, the rapper, the man who was in the airport on the day of the live. That is the first systemic layer, and it is the layer that reframes everything else. Because now the question is not, why was Papoose not on the live? The question is, why was a man who is officially on the champ's management team not on the champ's biggest merch drop of the summer? Those are two completely different questions. The first one is about a boyfriend skipping a moment. The second one is about a manager missing a meeting. And in the second version of that question, the whole story changes shape, because now you are not talking about a relationship problem. You are talking about an operational problem inside the business of one of the most decorated female athletes in American history. That is systemic angle number one. The management transition happened. The boyfriend inherited part of the seat, and the first big test of the new structure was a public disaster. The second systemic angle is even more damaging, because it goes to where the champ chose to spend her professional capital. Because in the same window where all of this merch chaos was unfolding, Claressa Shields also confirmed she was exiting mixed martial arts after a 3-fight run in the PFL and returning to full-time boxing. That is a significant career-defining pivot. That is the kind of pivot that requires a real management structure to negotiate, to publicize, to convert into leverage. And the person she publicly credits with helping guide that pivot alongside her team is the same partner who was not in the room for the merch drop. So now you have to ask yourself, honestly, if the management structure cannot execute a polyester tracksuit auction cleanly, what is the confidence level that it can execute a full boxing career reset cleanly? Because those two things are not separate. They are the same operation. And the operation, in public view, is not passing its stress tests. The third systemic angle is the one that even the loudest defenders of a champ have not been able to explain away. And this is where you have to zoom all the way out. Because in the era we are in right now, athletes have never had more infrastructure available to them. There are entire agencies whose only job is to help champions drop merch the right way. There are logistics companies that will spin up a full Shopify storefront, integrate payment processors, build a size chart, build a return policy, connect a shipping platform, and design a branded checkout page for a couple $1,000s and a 2-week timeline. There are branding consultants who will walk a champion through what colors to launch in what seasons. And I promise you, none of them would ever, under any professional circumstance, greenlight thick polyester sauna suits as the flagship product of a July drop. That is not opinion. That is basic retail seasonality, and any merch coordinator working out of a spare bedroom in Brooklyn could have told the champ that in a 5-minute phone call. So the question is not whether the help exists. The help exists. The help is cheap. The help is standing at the door with a resume. The question is why the help is not in the room. And the only honest answer to that question, the answer that every industry person watching this thing unfold is quietly saying to each other in group chats, is that somebody around the champ is either blocking the help from getting in or refusing to recognize that the help is needed. And when you draw the line from the merch failure back to the management transition, back to the new addition on the management team, you land on the same door every time. That is not a coincidence. That is a pattern. And patterns in business are how you predict what happens next. And here is the thing I have to say plainly, because if I do not say it, I am not being real with you. What we are watching in slow motion is what happens when a world-class athlete's business decisions start getting run through a filter that is not built for business decisions. That is the diagnosis. That is not a personal attack on Papoose. That is not a personal attack on the champ. That is a structural read of what a 2-time Olympic gold medalist should look like operationally versus what the champ is actually looking like operationally. And the gap between those two pictures is exactly the size of the airport story. Which brings us to the reveal, and I want you to sit with this one, because this is the part that even the biggest reaction channels have not put into words yet. What Claressa Shields accidentally confirmed on that live stream, without ever saying the words out loud, is that the promise of the new era of her career, the promise that firing her 10-year manager and bringing her partner Papoose into the management structure was going to unlock a bigger, more independent, more direct-to-consumer version of the GWOAT brand, is, based on the receipts we currently have, not working. That is not a rumor. That is not speculation. That is not gossip. That is a read of the on-camera evidence versus the publicly announced business plan. The plan said, according to the joint statement she and Papoose released, that he would be part of her management going forward. The execution showed on camera that on the biggest self-run business day of her summer, that new management structure produced a live stream with no size chart, no storefront, no return policy, no shipping infrastructure, no co-host, no photographer, no crisis plan, and no partner in the room. Those two things cannot both be true at full strength. Either the management structure is what it says it is, in which case its first public test failed catastrophically, or the management structure is not what it says it is, in which case we are looking at a public partnership announcement that is not translating into actual operational partnership. And either version of that answer is a genuine problem for the brand of a fighter who has been telling the world for a decade that she is the greatest to ever do it. And here is the part that even seasoned business people are pointing at right now, because this is where the story stops being funny. The champ has allegedly, according to what has been reported and reacted to across the space, been logging into other people's streams under fake identities to argue back at her own critics. Think about what that behavior implies about the level of protection she is currently getting. In a real management structure, when a champion of Claressa Shields' stature has a viral moment go against her, the phones start ringing on her behalf. Publicists reach out to the outlets. Managers get on the phone with the platforms. Crisis PR firms draft holding statements. Brand partners get pre-briefed so nobody bails. The champion, meanwhile, goes silent, hits the gym, and lets the professionals fix the problem. What allegedly happened instead was the opposite. The champ herself, personally allegedly, was the one doing the damage control on the internet, under a fake persona. At hours no manager would ever let a fighter of her caliber be on the internet. That is not a management failure. That is the absence of management. And that is the truth bomb sitting at the bottom of this whole story. The GWOAT is fighting her own PR war on the internet in the middle of the night. Alone. That is the receipt that changes how you read every single other clip in this saga. That is why Big Keys was able to eat for a full week without a single professional response coming from a champ's camp. That is why the sweatsuit clip metastasized instead of getting killed within 24 hours. That is why the airport story stuck. Because there was nobody in the room protecting the myth. And the myth, without protection, does not survive contact with the modern internet. Not for anybody. Not even the greatest woman of all time. But I want to be really careful about how I land this, because this is where I have to be honest with the people who genuinely root for the champ, and I do count myself among them. Because here is the thing. Claressa Shields is still Claressa Shields. The belts are still on the wall. The Olympic medals are still in the case. The record is still the record. Nothing that happened this weekend erased a single accomplishment on her resume. Not one. She is still on the pure sporting side, one of the most decorated fighters this country has ever produced, male or female, in any combat sport across any era. And the woman who does the work in the gym, the woman who makes weight, the woman who steps into the ring when the lights come on, the woman who has spent her whole career carrying women's boxing on her back at a time when the sport barely wanted to pay for the ring lights. That woman is still winning. That woman does not need anybody to defend her resume. That woman has already carved her name into the sport in permanent ink. What this weekend exposed is not the fighter. What this weekend exposed is the operation around the fighter. And there is a really important difference there, because operations can be fixed. Operations can be rebuilt. Operations can be professionalized. The person who has spent an entire decade proving she can absorb punches in the ring and keep her feet, that person absolutely has the constitution to absorb this specific moment, learn from it, and come back with a real merch team, a real storefront, a real launch strategy, and a real support system. The receipts even suggest she is capable of course-correcting fast, because the same fighter who had this livestream disaster is the same fighter who publicly walked away from a 10-year management relationship the moment she felt it was not working for her anymore. That is not the behavior of somebody who is stuck. That is the behavior of somebody who is willing to make hard calls when a call needs to be made. And that means the next call, the call to actually staff up the business side of Claressa Shields the way a two-time undisputed champion deserves to be staffed up, is a call that is entirely within her reach. And the contrast one-liner I want to leave you with is this. One version of Claressa Shields is running her business from her phone at 3 in the morning under a fake name. The other version of Claressa Shields is undefeated across 2 Olympic cycles and holds every belt in her weight class simultaneously. Both versions are real. Both versions are her. And the only question that matters right now is which version she chooses to feed going forward. Because the belts do not lie. The resume does not lie. The work she has already put in does not lie. What has to change is not the fighter. What has to change is the room the fighter is standing in when the camera turns on. And if she picks the right room, if she staffs the right team, if she lets Papoose be a partner instead of a manager, or lets him be a manager only if he can actually show up on the day the merch drops, then the sweatsuit weekend becomes a footnote. Then, Big Keys becomes a chapter. Then the GWOAT keeps her seat at the table she has already fought her way into. Because the truth is, the champ still has the pen. The champ still has the leverage. The champ still has the name. And the champ, more than anybody in her weight class right now, still has the option to write the next chapter any way she wants. But make no mistake, this is not the last time we are going to be talking about Claressa Shields this year. Not even close. Because there is another fight already on the calendar. The champ has publicly signaled she is fully back to boxing after closing the MMA chapter. And the next opponent conversation is already heating up on the timeline. There is another Papoose story loading in the chamber, because the airport clip is not going to be the last time the internet lines up his location against her calendar. And there's a very real question about whether the champ is going to sit down with a proper merch team and relaunch this line the right way, or whether she's going to double down on the direct approach and hand the internet another viral weekend. Any one of those 3 storylines drops, and we are right back here breaking it down. So if you want to actually stay in front of this, not 2 days late, not after every other channel has already clipped it, but on the same day it happens, you already know what to do. Hit that subscribe button, turn on the bell, and drop a comment telling me which of the 3 you think blows up first, the next fight announcement, the next Papoose location clip, or the next merch drop attempt. I read the comments, I pin the sharpest takes, and I build the next video around what the room is actually asking about. And speaking of what is next, the video I want you to click on right now is the one I have been sitting on for 2 weeks. Because if you thought the sweatsuit story was messy, wait until you see the receipts on who was actually in the room when Claressa Shields decided to fire her 10-year manager, and why one specific name keeps showing up in the paperwork that the champ has never publicly explained. That is the video. That is the one. Click it now, because the pieces I put together in that breakdown are going to change how you read every single move she has made this year. I will see you inside it.